Hold it! Stay right there. What are you waiting for? Kill them! Kill them both! Now, wait a minute. Is it money you're after? I'll give you as much as you want.
May the saints forgive you, because I won't.
Hey, you're listening to another episode of Threshold Saints. This is Jin The Ninja, and enjoy the show.
Brother Greg Kaminsky from the Occult of Personality podcast, which is one of maybe the longest running. Greg, do you think it's the longest running occult podcast?
Oh, yeah, I guess it probably is the longest running at this point.
So, and also author, scholar, occultist, and tantric Buddhist. So just like all around really amazing, right up this show's alley. So just some of your work, Greg, you wrote Pronaos, which was released in 2021, which is kind of the Nyongdro introduction to tantric Buddhism. Pronaos also means the entrance. So I personally love that. And then you also wrote the Celestial Intelligences, the Pico della Mirandolas Angelology, and that also was released in 2021. And is that right? 2021, yeah.
Yeah.
And then you have your 9 Spheres, which is the Revelation of Wonderment, 9 Spheres, which is the teachings of your personal teacher, which was released in 2023. And I know you're kind of the expert on Pico della Mirandola, like maybe the OG expert on Pico della Mirandola, but I'm also personally very interested in Christian Kabbalah. So maybe we'll talk about that another time. But I find that work very fascinating, and all of your work is very incredible. But I think Pronaos, for me personally, has really, like, it affected my personal life. It helped me get through the pandemic. It helped me sort of reignite my sort of reignite my passion for practice, and sort of like make me reassess where I was going with it, and like where I wanted to go with it, like to have higher tantric goals, to have because I'm sure you know this, Greg, but you can get very stuck in certain practices, even when they're very edifying and amazing and you have incredible experiences. It is very easy to go off path. So I know I gave you a little bit of a long-winded introduction, but I'll let you introduce yourself and whatever work, and plug everything that you want to plug.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here. Let's see. So yeah, the podcast, Occult of Personality. Also the chamberofreflection.com, or it's just chamberofreflection.com, which is like our exclusive member website where we do some extra stuff, which is kind of cool. We're doing like a meditations on the tarot book study group. So that's been really interesting. Yeah, the books have been life-changing for me. So I'm glad you appreciate them. Glad other people appreciate them. Yeah, the Pronaos book was interesting. I don't know. I think it was interesting because I spent like years doing the practice. I don't know, what was it? Probably like two years maybe. And then writing about it seemed like it didn't take much time in sort of like in distinction to that. So it was just an interesting sort of phenomena, the way it was kind of like easy for me to write it, because the things that I was writing about were so intimate for so long that it wasn't like I had to think about it or struggle with it or figure out what I was trying to say, because it was all kind of right there. It just needed to be like typed out kind of thing. So I'm glad it helped you.
It definitely helped me. I know I said I would, so I'll just shout them out now. So several people from my podcasting circle have purchased your book. I won't say that I played a small role in suggesting it to them, but I will shout out Nick, not Big Nick, but at Third Eye Homunculi. He bought your book, and as well as DJ Poolhouse. So we haven't really discussed it. I'm going to have Nick back on to discuss it, and we'll discuss other things, but I think that'll be one of our main topics in our next episode. And it's definitely been a life-changing book for me, even though I have been a practicing Buddhist for over 20 years, which is really crazy to say that, but yeah, so I just think it's incredible, and I think also having your occult background, your medievalist kind of perspective, and looking at it as like for a working magician and saying like, how can I introduce Vajrayana, which is already quite saturated in terms of Western magic? How can I introduce this in a traditional way and not in just like a edgelord magic way? And I think you did a phenomenal job of that. But if you have any thoughts on how you approach that, or what if you were thinking of that?
Oh yeah, I mean, I was I guess I think I kind of talked about this a bit in the book, but basically it was like all of the like amazing magical alchemical sort of miracles and mythology and methodology that I sort of found suggested in Western esotericism is actually like taught and practiced in Vajrayana that I've found. So it was like a huge revelation to me, because I didn't expect to find it there, and it wasn't like I don't know what you'd call it really. It was like it just seemed like it was all kind of engineered by somebody else. Like I didn't really want to become a Buddhist.
Right.
I had no intention of becoming a Buddhist and no interest in becoming a Buddhist, because I was like practicing like, basically I think you could call it like Christian theurgy, I guess you'd say at this point, like with like kind of like an alchemical kind of influence. But once I met my teacher, Traktung Rinpoche, that kind of all got evaporated, because it was so obvious almost immediately that it was like, oh, now I'm starting to understand, like, yeah, there was no way I could like keep doing what I was doing, knowing that there was somebody out there like him, because that would have been ridiculous. So at that point, it was like, okay, well, he teaches Vajrayana, and so that's what I'm going to do. But it turned out okay, because all the things I was actually interested in are part of it anyway. So, and there's actual ways to do them and make it work. And so I found it to be like a huge revelation, relief, like, and I think that comes across in the book.
You know, I think I mean, my experience is much lesser, but I do come from more of that, I would say, left-hand path but Christian, kind of theurgical, maybe. I know the kids call it today sinister Catholicism is the cool way, is what the cool kids say. So I do come from more of that perspective, but I was also going to Dharma talks. I was also like active in a Buddhist studies program. So I think I relate to everything in the book and what you've just said. But Western magic for me, it didn't click. Like I knew things and I obviously could recognize things, but it was only in Vajrayana that things began to really make sense for me personally. And really start to, I was able to sort of penetrate the densities, sort of like see the layers. And I'd like very much, it was probably a little too fast at first, but I it was the first time where things really started to make sense. And then I was able to go back and say, oh, okay, like when Hegel was referring to this is what he was talking about, or whomever. But I just think that that's very interesting that you had maybe not the similar experience, but a parallel experience where you saw the same things in Western magic and Western occultism that you then saw in Vajrayana. And I completely agree. And I have said this, and I don't know if you agree, but I find it to be a sort of a perennialist. I don't know if I love that word, but perennial system in the sense that there definitely is a much greater kind of, well, it's the perennial wisdom and method. So yeah, I mean, that's what I found anyway.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. Yeah, I guess just to clarify, I don't know, just I think about this like this idea of like traditionalism or a perennialism. Like Pico's definitely would subscribe to that idea, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But on some level, I think like perennial like also implies like that there is time, like an eternalism, but I'm not sure really. I don't know that it matters. I'm just something I think about.
No, I like that you problematize it for me, Greg. I think that that's very interesting. I think that's a great point. I think whose work I've been interested in is this German sociologist named Karl Jaspers. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He was a kind of early Tibetologist pre-World War II, working in Afghanistan. And his theory was that Buddhism was kind of an axial age religion, obviously referring to Bronze Age, sort of like turning away from like the yajna, the Vedas, and the horse sacrifice and all of that. And he came to sort of understand Buddhism in a maybe more cyclical way, like maybe even a more Buddhist way, where he saw it as a sort of dharma, as a reoccurrent pivot point that would emerge at sort of technological advances in civilization, but also at the points of their decline.
Yeah, that's really super interesting. It's also super interesting when you then like start to think about that in relation to the idea of Tantra within Buddhism as this like subversive left-hand path movement that like will assume the like whatever religious faith tradition is, going on in the area as like a cover story for its own kind of thing, which is like the methods of Tantra, which, they can take place in Buddhism or, in Hinduism or in Islam or Judaism or certainly Christianity. Like it doesn't really matter like the outward kind of guise or garb. It's just like another like a more radical method. And I feel like that when you think about that in relation to it and like how all these things kind of like spring up at certain junctures of social cultural, political, religious instability, economic instability, and then you find these things like in full bloom. But that's like what Gurdjieff said too, is like the more like, what was it, something about like the more difficult the circumstances, the better the work, provided you remember to do the work.
You know, I am not as good at Gurdjieff as like your usual crew, but I'm familiar with it. And I did have the pleasure of speaking with D.W. Williams, who's an author, and she has a podcast channel called Hermes Rising on YouTube. And she's a very strong in Gurdjieff, and I think that's her main topic of research. And so I found when I spoke with her that there was a lot of overlap and a lot of similarity in this idea of sort of like, I'll go with your metaphor, like planting the garden of bijas, or, you know, planting the seeds of dharma and then blooming them as needed in the different sort of periods, not just civilizational sort of cycles, but also in like a person's life, also in like your individual sadhana. So I found that very fascinating.
That's super cool. Yeah, I would agree with that too. That I like to think about it that way. It's much more like fractal and like mythopoetic.
I think that's a really interesting point, and I think you've made this a lot on your show, this idea of mythopoesis and sort of the, you know, how we narrativize ourselves, how we narrativize the world, how then the different sort of ways that we can reflect back upon it and sort of see it as existing outside of time. So not an eternalist view, but more of a fractaline view. I think that's a very good way to put it, like how you put it before. I think exactly right. And that's what a flower is, really. And if we're going to use the metaphor for a flower, I mean, it should be a lotus, I think.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. Rose is a good one too, but yeah, that it's beautiful. And I think it's important because the same thing like Pico discovered, like where your thoughts are is not only like where you are, it's what you become. And so when we can see ourselves and the world in that mythopoetic way, which is counterintuitively more accurate in the absolute sense, it actually allows us to feel much closer to the reality than our typical human interpretation would normally allow for. That's my experience anyway.
No, I identify with that very strongly because I find the more I integrate sort of the experiences of sadhana, different sadhanas, different texts, different tantras, and also like the sort of like you know, the Adi Yoga or Dzogchen sort of mind training. I find the more I've had to incorporate that kind of more non-dual way of thinking, you know, that mythopoetic view of sort of having like a dreamlike sensibility towards the world where you're still in it, but then you're also not in it, but then you're also not wanting to go extreme. You're still walking very much the center, you're the middle path, and you are always moderating yourself. I mean, that's for me. Maybe you don't have that. I'm still a little wild, but I try I do try, and you know, I find that to be very accurate. But it's difficult, of course. It's very difficult, and you know, but I do think that is an interesting way to describe it, to articulate sort of the process that we reflect back on experiences, spiritual experiences in sadhana, and then also like this is something that comes up when I've discussed with other like occultists or magicians, and maybe you'll be better to comment on this, but I try not to grasp at experiences that I've had in sadhana or have had spiritually in the Vajrayana context. So I know that this is a very typical Buddhist kind of like way of thinking, where you might have incredible things that you happen or whatever, and you don't grasp at them the next time. Like every day is a fresh day. You go to it totally new, sort of totally like as a child, like with that kind of wonderment of sadhana, with faith, with like devotional ways, in the ways that obviously Buddhists do, but not Hindu particularly way. But you understand what I'm saying.
Sure.
But I think that a lot of magicians will go to, not, I don't think of myself as a magician per se, but I think that they don't necessarily understand when I say that you don't want to grasp for experiences. Of course, I want to have them sometimes, but it's not like I never go into it being like, oh, I'm going to, I always try and go into it like very clear.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. I guess there's a couple things I would say about that, and I don't know that they're in agreement or congruent. The first is the thing my teacher always stresses, which is we are in pursuit of wisdom, and there is no experience that can ever be wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not in pursuit of experience. That is not the point or the purpose of our practice. However, and this is not really part of the teaching, this is more part of my opinion, is that experiences in practice or mystical experiences or what have you, they are important as kind of well, there can be important in different ways. Sometimes these are simultaneous, sometimes not. They're like important as an invitation to like deepen your practice, your commitment, your devotion. They are signposts, meaning you may be making progress, or you maybe have done something that was being acknowledged in some way or some form. They can also be ways of sort of, I guess you'd say, like instruction or teaching through like a non-traditional method that you can like learn either methods or techniques or different ways of understanding yourself and the world and how those relate to each other. So it's not that they're like, I think the main thing is like to not like continually refer back to them in memory as a way to kind of like reminisce and to like stoke one's pride in oneself, because they don't come from us.
Mm-hmm.
So we can't sort of like feel inflated or elated about them, but we can feel grateful for them, and we can appreciate the fact that it's so rare that something like that happens, and it's so beautiful and sublime, and that we're so fortunate to have that experience, but to yet not like constantly like think about it. like you say, like don't grasp at it. But it is important, I think, and it would be wrong to think that one was making like serious and significant progress on the path without any kind of spiritual or mystical moments. I think that would be odd, at least for me. I don't know. But that's
No,
just me. I don't know I don't know.
No, you're totally right. Even in Shakta Tantra, it's very clear that to do Tantra Marga, like to walk on the path of Tantra, is to occasionally have incredible bliss experiences. Now, we don't describe it exactly as exactly the same in Buddhism, but I feel like there's a deep relationship with that kind of thinking where that you should like if well today's is a protector day, so if you're very good or you're very close with your personal or what if you're dharma protector, if you have that practice and it's one thing to do the puja, it's one thing to do the recitation, but if you don't have the experiences, it can feel very empty. I think it doesn't feel like that for me. That's not my experience, but I'm just saying I think for a lot of other people, they do get frustrated a little bit with Vajrayana because it doesn't necessarily produce fruits right away. And a lot of the fruits are internal, which is honestly probably a good thing. But I think that having the experiences is exactly like what you say. I think it's important. I think it's important touchstones. I was thinking lighthouses when you were speaking, sort of reference points, and not as a nostalgic, not as nostalgia, but as more of a it's real. You can confirm through your own wisdom science that it is real, and then the text will also say like things should happen in certain ways. So I think yeah, you can't practice wisdom science without having experiences.
Yeah,
Now,
it's tricky though, because like some of these experiences, so called, like don't involve you, or they don't, you know what I mean? They don't involve me. And like,
yes.
so then when you come to that, like the, whatever you would call it, the experience of nothingness or emptiness, then I don't know. Then the only way to know it is like missing time, or like I did something wrong. Maybe I fell asleep during practice, or, and then it's just like, then it's just contemplating like the implications of what that actually means. Because then there's no way to like do that while it's happening or not happening, as the case may be. If that even makes any sense.
No, it absolutely makes sense. And I think that's what makes it difficult, is the unverified personal gnosis. It's every magician's worst enemy, right? I mean, you know this better than I do, but I think that for my experiences with Buddhism have been 100 times more profound, and also more textually, like I can reference other people's experiences in text and say, okay, this is very similar. Maybe not exactly the same, but it's very similar. And so in some ways I can say this is real, but I also know that is sort of like I'll use a more Western word, like a kleepot, like a more of a trap or a skanda to, keep you in a kind of like thing that's like self-referential, it's self-confirming, but there are elements that also are real. So that is really you have to discern, right? And discernment is really, in my experience, is found through the practice. Like keep doing it. Don't like say, oh yes, exactly like what you said. Like you don't get the laurel crown just because you had an experience. Like you keep going. So yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense what you said.
Yeah, I also feel like this coming to like know nothingness or emptiness in like a real way, in that is not intellectual, like evaporates any kind of sense of like I've done it, or I've accomplished it, or like I'm great, or because that can no longer be, like, you can't pretend anymore after that, which, you know, for better or worse. And then it becomes like, I don't know, it feels like, it should feel like a great, like, relief, but it also feels like you want to throw up, or at least I feel like I want to throw up. And I'm not sure exactly why, but it's like, it's terrifying on some level that there's nothing, and that nothing is like all of this and is perceiving it all. So it's, yeah, it feels like, well, what a great relief. I don't have to worry about that anymore. And also, like, holy shit, then like, what is that really? Is that what's really going on? Because then you can't really pretend that it's what you thought it was. So I don't know. I feel like that, and that I feel like also, like, I can't rely on myself to know, like, that happened. So I have to rely on the guru, because he
100%.
knows and I don't know and can't know. And without him, I would have thought that, like, I was like having some sort of strange, like, fucked up condition, and like I was probably going to end up dead soon. Like, I didn't really know what was going on at all. So yeah. I don't know. Make of that what you will.
Well, I appreciate that you share that, Greg. I think for me, I mean, I totally agree that the guru, obviously paramount, number one dude, obviously pointing out instruction, so important to have those, you know, if like, I'll just speak from my personal experience. I just know that the situation with the Dharma Center that I attended for many years during the pandemic was drastically altered by the move online, and my whole relationship with Dharma sort of changed in that time. So a lot of what I had to do was like refer back to all my, you know, everybody, this is a very, very granular Buddhist thing, but to have like your empowerment folder, sort of like reference it and be like, okay, what are some things I can do? Like, what are some like ways I can go about this? So that for me, that's how I approached it. Is I had to take older instructions that I had notes on, that I had recorded in audio, and sort of reapply them without necessarily having that human guide. Now,
But that is more like a more traditional way of doing it, though.
Well, I agree with you, but some people don't necessarily appreciate it in the way that you do. So I think it's hard though, because like you said, you it's not like I can just like call up someone necessarily. Like I can send an email, sure. I could send an email in Chinese, and you know, with my like grade 6 Chinese, and hopefully someone will answer it. But you know, the reality is like it's lesser. It's not lesser. It's just different, and you have to rely. I don't want to say myself after you've said that, and it's true about self and like relying on like the affirmation of the self to kind of validate experiences, but I have to also rely on myself to like go read the commentary of this text, go read the commentary of this text, or what did this teacher who I know practices sadhana or had this protector or had this ishta, and like what were they doing, what were they saying, what were they like producing, what work were they producing at that same period? Because I think that's very instructive in its own way, like looking at especially if you're doing that same practice, and then you go and look at what someone else is producing, thinking about, talking about, teaching about, and then that has been very helpful for me personally, is to find those thinkers, like historical people who are doing similar sadhanas or similar practices, and looking at what they're doing and what they're saying.
Yeah, for me, I feel like you're right. It's just slightly different. It's like what I start with the sadhana and like go through the text of that, like with like as granular level as possible, because I all invariably find things in there that I have been repeating, several times a day for years. And then I'm like, really haven't fully considered like completely. And so there's all of that. And if I could only apply like the words of the sadhana, like that would be enough in and of itself. But if I need more, then I can go to like the commentaries and teachings on it. There's like transcripts or recordings and things, and like invariably find like a treasure trove of all kinds of bits of wisdom to sort of change your approach, to change your disposition, to change sort of the level of intensity and commitment, to sort of like just freshen up your sort of stale kind of like designated object of way of being and doing.
Mm-hmm.
And it just makes a huge difference because you're applying effort and really trying. And if you look for it even a little bit, you're going to find something that's going to like make it a change and a transformation. And then that invariably for me affects like the actual practice itself with the visualization and the mantra.
Mm-hmm.
And then from wherever that goes from there, it usually feels more complete and more intense and more satisfying.
That was very well said, Greg. I completely agree with you. I mean, and I don't know, you always seem like such a calm sage when you record and when you do shows. I mean, I know that we all struggle with our things. I'm definitely a little hyper still and still working on that element. But I definitely find that, you're totally right. I think that even the best sadhana can get stale, and it's not because the sadhana itself is stale, it's because your relationship, like your dialectical relationship with the deity or with the guru, like if you're doing guru yoga or whatever it is, that can be stale, and you can be stale. And I will tell on myself a little bit, and I don't know if you relate to this or not, but sometimes I have been doing, so like there's a certain Dharani that I've been doing for many, many years. And I have this horrible habit where I have mixed a little bit of Tibetan pronunciation in with the Sanskrit, which is not the way I was taught. I was taught to how to do it properly in Sanskrit, but I have developed that habit from reading the practice text sometimes when I'm tired. So I just will say, like, yes, you can always modify, you can always get better. And I think those little sort of like things that you make adjustments to, I think that helps the most in the long term. Like, and those little improvements too, like that you see yourself making. Like when I change the way I pronounce something just to be a little bit more precise, more accurate, even the bija, just saying it a little bit more enunciated, that can really make a huge difference for me, I have found personally.
Interesting. Yeah. I'm trying to think like what has made the most difference for me. And I would say for me, what the things that make the most difference are not like the technical details so much as it is like being joyful. Like if I'm joyful, then pretty much everything else kind of falls into place with practice, with life, with whatever. So I think a lot of it is like sort of the disposition, and then trying to like really maintain like the view of reality outside of practice, formal practice, in such a way that you can just keep reminding myself. And I'm not good at this or in any way perfect, and I would tell you I have just as many problems as anybody else in terms of, you know, normal everyday life. But if I can just like maintain that view, like I know like whatever it is that I'm concerned about is not actually like worth even thinking about, that I should be, if I'm actually like having to think, I should be thinking like, how can I help other people? How can I help the people around me to like lighten their load a little bit and make their lives easier, or, you know, lessen their worries, or, you know, just like becoming, you know, more easygoing and like not so uptight about whatever is happening, because mostly I don't have any control over it, and I can just, you know, be a certain way, you know, and I can bring like a lot of negative, like tight, closed down, intense, like worrying kind of energy, or I can bring like a kind of like carefree, sparkly, like happy, like I don't give a fuck kind of energy. And one of those is way easier for everyone else in the room to deal with, including me. So then it just becomes like a practical thing. Like how do I make every moment less tedious and terrifying and terrible, you know? And then if it comes down to just like method acting through part of my day, then that's what it is.
That's very interesting that you brought up the point about method acting, because that was my next question to what you said. Is like, I agree with you 100%. We're on the same page. Like, I would like to get to that place where I am so in control of my own emotions, where there's not like super variation or flux in it. And not that there won't be, but that I have better maneuverability, where I'm not so like, I don't have to live in my feelings.
I mean, it's you still feel them, but it's just like you can choose. You don't have to suppress it or express it. You can just choose a different option, which is just to feel it and then let it go, if possible.
I think it's always possible, and I think it's always about our choice. But I definitely think it's possible.
It is, but it doesn't always feel like it is in the moment. And
No, you're totally.
sometimes, and their habitual reactions to these emotions tend to like carry us away without us thinking. So it is a struggle against our tendencies. But that struggle, that conscious suffering, is what produces spiritual progress. I mean, I don't want it to be that way. You know, if someone had told me ahead of time, like, hey, you know, the spiritual path is actually about confronting all the problems and like obstacles and ways that you know, need to change, like that's what you're going to have to deal with and confront and work on, I would have been like, oh, that's not what I'm looking for. No. But it turns out that that's what it is about. So kind of, you know, too late now.
So let me pivot a little bit, but also working off of what you said. Do you find, I know you've spoken about this and obviously you've written about it, and on your own show, you've discussed this and at length, pretty much. But I think it's still worth asking that between like the more Christian theurgic practices that you were more involved with before and Tantra now, do you find that there is more kind of implication for dealing with these exact things like emotionality, kind of reactivity, like the Maras of the day, we could say?
I mean, I feel like it's really it's not a fair comparison because,
Okay.
like in Vajrayana, you have the guru, so you have the enlightened master who, like, he knows the path from beginning to end and can teach you the path and knows like you better than yourself and how you're going to screw it up ahead of time. And so, like, and you don't have that at all in the other. There's nothing of the sort. And that changes everything, because it's like, you know, someone who's willing to like get up in your business and like point out where you're like making mistakes when you might not even notice it or not want to notice it, and forcing you to confront it, sometimes in ways that are shocking or uncomfortable, but always kind, although it might not seem like it in the moment. And yeah, so that is a huge, massive difference. I think there's other big differences too. Like, I feel like the empowerments in the tantric tradition just are far more impactful and have the potential for transformation in ways that are really shocking. And I find that I only really experience that through like consecration, like in the Gnostic tradition. But that's not really like a empowerment in the same way. So I don't know.
I think
feel
that
like
it was sorry, Greg, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I know it was a challenging question, and I know you field it often when you've appeared on other people's shows. So I just appreciate that you clarified that and that you answered it in a very nuanced way.
Oh, thank you.
I guess I'll ask you, so going off that, so I agree with you that it's not truly a fair comparison. And I do agree that, and just in my experience, that Vajrayana has been personally transformative for me in a way that the Western traditions necessarily weren't. Now, I do have an Asian background, so that obviously not that I think that religion is about race or anything like that, but I just think that maybe I had the sort of seeds planted earlier for Dharma because of my exposure to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then later on, it became the system that made the most sense to me. Whereas Western magic always felt like a very foreign, not foreign, but it just didn't, it felt very external. It felt very external. And maybe that was just my view. And I had like a very materialistic view of things in some ways, as many young magicians, I'm sure you've met many of them, have sometimes, you know. And but it was really Dharma that transformed my sort of view of reality and my view of understanding of whatever yourself is, but whatever my relationship with that, and also looking at the things that I wanted to change, and then sort of having a lot more tools to sort of accomplish that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I feel like for me, I kind of starting to look for more nuanced understandings of reality than what I was finding in like magical traditions. And I think like I started reading I Am That, the talks with Nisargadatta Maharaj. And that kind of like put me over the edge. Because I don't even think I was like a quarter of the way through the book. I would read like one talk and then like have to put the book down because it was so powerful, like what he was saying and the perspective he was speaking from. That, and then I remembered like at one point, like just having like the craziest, most intense, like mystical experience, like hit me out of nowhere. Like I wasn't even doing any kind of practice or meditation or anything. And I know it was just from like reading the book and like thinking about it. And so it was after that, I was like, I knew like pretty much anybody who spoke or wrote in that way, like Nisargadatta, like speaking of like how he was speaking, I was like, that is what I'm interested in. Because I could just tell, like, because of what happened and how it happened and my reaction to the whole thing, I was like, this is the way.
I mean, thank you for sharing that, Greg. I think that's very profound. I have had similar experiences. Was a book published in 2017. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. It's called Adult Mika, by Rajarshi Nandi, who is a Shakta Tantra from Bengal. He's a Kamakhya devotee. And so obviously this is not quite Buddhist Tantra, but I found that book extremely profound in the sense of I was making connections to all the things that I had spent like a decade and a half at that point, I guess, sort of learning about, thinking about, but not necessarily experiencing. And then I think that opened me up to sort of looking at, okay, like what is it about Dharma that I'm attracted to, but then at the same time something is just not, I don't know, I just felt like I wasn't totally there. Maybe it was my mindset, maybe it was just that was not where my focus was, and so it wasn't producing results, because you can't, you can't grow food if you don't plant the seeds, and if you don't care for the field. So I think maybe I was missing a few steps. But I kind of did that thing where sometimes people do, where they rush into a practice and think that they will instantly produce results, or and that's also very like when I was a kid, we used to go to this Mahayana Chinese temple, and they would always, the monks have very good nature, but they would always tell people to do things in a very cultural way. Like people would have business problems, and it would be, okay, do yellow kubera puja, and we'll figure it out for you, and all, just like that. It's very exterior, very outer sort of layer. But it's a good way to get people who are more materially minded attracted to Dharma. So I appreciate it for that. But I also think it's interesting that not even doing a practice necessarily can still produce spiritual experiences and results in some ways. But now I'm so practice heavy. Like I definitely read, and I definitely read, like most of my books are nonfiction, very Dharma minded. But I think that, yeah, I mean, I identify with what you said. I think that's profound, that, to have experiences just from hearing the seeds, and then they kind of expand inside of you, and whatever that is, and in your consciousness. And and it opens something. It opens something that maybe was dormant or closed off or fallen or whatever. And you can sort of like re-engage with it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really amazing. I feel like those things are kind of like ever present, kind of like waiting for those who are ready for them. At least that's what I would like to think.
Oh, I agree with you. I agree with you. I think that we have to be ready for it. I think we have to want it, but not in a desirous way, but want it in the sense that we can see where we can apply it in ourselves, and then also be ready for it, like ready for the challenges. And it poses a lot of challenges.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, maybe you could speak on some of that, because I think people think that it's just easy and you can just like do the mantra recitation and the puja. And I'm still very Kriya minded, Greg. Like I'm not perfect in any capacity where I don't do things for like material gain. I'm not saying it like that. I mean, I do focus a lot on like my doing my water offering perfect, doing my lamp offering perfectly. I do think of that.
That's
I mean, maybe
good.
that is, and I agree, it is good in a way, but I also like, I want to be at that point, like a lot of the higher lamas, and they can do it and they don't really think about it, and they're kind of like always in a joy state, and they can just do it, and it's just like beautiful and natural, and their pujas are beautiful and natural. And I'm still like, I'm not clumsy or anything, but it's definitely not perfect.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel like perfection is kind of like I don't know. It's a judgment and like a human concept. So it's not that theirs isn't beautiful, and might be objectively more beautiful in some ways, but um just the fact that you do it, like, and that you're devoted to it and faithful to it and want to do it perfectly and make the effort, and like, there is some merit in that, certainly. But you're asking about struggles and difficulties, and I mean, I think the main one is like, once it's pointed out to you how it actually is, and then you begin to like gather like evidence on your own that what you've been told is correct, then like you're still you, but then you have to like think like, well, if what I've been told is correct, and I know that is correct, even though I'm still me and still have all my same concerns and problems and worries and crap that I'm like constantly like enacting, like I have to start trying to change that, because it's all wrong. Like, it's completely wrong right from the beginning. So right from the part where I think I am, period, that's all wrong right from there. Everything from that point onward, wrong. So then the implication of that means like, well, I have to change my entire life. And then having to then like face that, accept it, and then try to do it, which is, I don't know. I mean, it's, on one hand, it's like, how do you build anything? Like, brick by brick, you just piece by piece. But at the same time, it seems impossible. But then this is where we have to like go back and remember, like, think about Nangdro when you started prostrations, like 111,000 seemed like might as well have been 111 million.
Mm-hmm.
But you still do it, and you actually do it, and you get it done,
Mm-hmm.
and then you move on. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's the same kind of thing. It's just at a grander scale. And, you know, the challenges are a little more subtle and a little more tricky and complex because we're tricky and complex.
Mm-hmm. No, that's 100% in my experience accurate, as well as in your amazing book. And I think maybe this is a good time to just reference how important, and really you introduced this concept, I think, sort of like maybe reintroduced it back into a more Western esoteric community. This just like importance of like pushing through. And I know, like for myself, like that has always been a challenge. Like I will open a sadhana, and like if I get an empowerment, I will be doing that sadhana every day for like the first I don't know, like I'm really good about it until I'm not, I guess. And you know, I think that that idea of being able to go back to a plenary practice to sort of reassess, to sort of regroup. And I know you make the case for Vajrasattva, as well as other people have made the case that it is a practice that you can always go back to. And I know many people who do practice it even in the higher yogas. So I think that pushing through, exactly like what you said, I think that is so important. I think that we lose that a lot, especially millennials, and not just millennials, but like Zoomers. And, you know, we're so online. We have so many, not that other people aren't, but I just think that there is like part of our reality is not quite based in material reality. It's based in this sort of superficial and cybernetic reality, which is, I also think is interesting in a way. But I just think that we're very easily distracted, and to be able to reassess where we're at, and it's okay to start at the beginning. It really is okay in my experience. And I don't know if I think you agree with that. Would you say that?
Yeah, I would say if you have to start over, and it's always okay to go back to the beginning. And sometimes that can just be like going through the stages of the yanas, like as part of your daily practice. Like it doesn't mean you actually have to like start from scratch all over at the beginning again. Like you can do that like in your practice, like in a single cycle, and like start with prostrations and go all the way through up to like whatever sadhana you normally do. So you're still kind of like going back to the beginning, but then not staying there, I guess is what I'm saying. Is like, yes, start over, but don't stay there as like some sort of like shame spiral or punishment, because that's not right either.
Yeah, I love that personally, and not just because I sometimes need to do that, but I agree with you that I really do agree with you that it isn't like it shouldn't be a punishment that you give yourself. It should be kind of like a reassessment of where you're going and where you're at with it. And you know, I know that nothing helps me when I've sort of not lost my way, but I just know the Vajrasattva practice has always been a close companion, we shall say. So I know it's been a very profound practice for me. It's not something that I do as often as I mean, during the pandemic, I was, you know, those japas were happening for me. So, but now I focus on other sadhanas. But, you know, I think it really, yeah, I think exactly everything you said, I love. I think that's exactly right. You don't have to go back all the way to the beginning. Don't treat it like a punishment. You know, treat it like an opening.
Yeah, that's good. I like that. I like that a lot. And I think, what else? I think pushing through this idea you talked about, like pushing through the difficulties and not like letting them deter you, even practicing through them, even when it feels like you don't want to, or your effort isn't really up to snuff, or it just feels like you're half-assing it. Like sometimes it's just going to feel that way, and not giving up. I think when you push through and then actually like accomplish, I feel like there's great like joy and satisfaction and energy that comes out of that. And when you don't, and when you like give up, give in, relent, like kind of like it feels like defeat and sort of like robs one of energy, and just like it just feels bad. And so like these rasas become ever increasingly more important as like the deeper we go into practice, because it becomes clear like that you're turning like your own sense impressions and perceptions into something more profound in each moment. And this is like earlier we talked about like this mythopoetic vision of oneself and one's world. And like, again, this is like this idea of where you're like taking gross sense impressions and feelings and turning them into something more refined and subtle and beautiful and sublime. And the more we can do that, the more energy we get. And the more energy we get, the more attention we can give to the practice. So it's like it feeds off itself.
No, you're 100%. You're totally correct. And it's interesting to speak with you and to hear you kind of like articulate these like very complex things that I struggle with. And, I do sort of have more of an edgelord element on Twitter, but I do try and approach it in this kind of mythopoetic way where I try and discuss like color, light, sound, not as these like concretized sort of things, but more in the abstract, more in like the conceptual and the non-conceptual layers. And I don't know if I'm always successful, but I think that's what I love about Dharma, is that it has these kind of multiple layers of meaning and understanding. And there is a kind of externality, there is a kind of internality, and then of course there's always the third secret thing.
Totally. Yeah, and I think you do succeed for the most part. So, and
well, thank you for saying that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I don't feel like I've ever thought like the whole edgelord or Twitter thing is in any way conflicting or not totally in accord with Dharma, or I mean, it's fun. And to me,
of course,
like again, like I said earlier, like joy or fun or happiness or this sort of playful engagement with appearance is, I mean, you can't be a tantrika if you're not going to do that and enjoy that, right? I mean, otherwise, how can you be a tantrika otherwise?
Exactly. I totally agree. I think that, I do worry because I really do love Dharma. Like, I really love Dharma. And there are people that sometimes will say they are Buddhist or they are tantrics or whatever it is. And it's not that they're not, and I'm not making a judgment on them or their practices because I don't know them or their practices, but I think that I try and toe the line where I don't reveal things that I feel would be totally inappropriate. But again, I do try and approach it in a fun, exactly what you said, like maybe a little playful Dakini way, like just give it a little flavor. So
yeah, I mean, who doesn't love playful Dakinis? Like, if you don't love playful Dakinis, you might be dead.
I agree, Greg. They honestly, the doing Dakini practice for me has been immensely helpful in some of my. It's not my default to be like a stern like person or recalcitrant or anything, but I definitely can go a little bit on that when I'm really hitting it, especially with the doing like the higher male deities, sometimes you do get a little bit more, I don't know if it's pragmatism or it's more, you just get a little more entrenched, and then the Dakinis are there to always help you out, like help you, learn how to do the cemetery dance. So I just feel like you have to bring that, because that is what is so amazing about Dharma, is that you can have both things. Both things can coexist, and it is about joy. That's been my experience anyway. It's much more about joy than it is about like that stern father kind of like religious element. Of course we have that too, but the joy thing I think is very important, especially for people now, and how people want to live, and just being able to accept that you can't control anything. You can't really, I mean, I can only, and I'm not even successful all the time at controlling myself. So,
Oh, I'm totally not either. So I'm working on it though. I'm working on it.
100%.
Many times a day, I'm working on it.
I mean, that's the other thing. It's a constant theurgic process. That's what I found.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it is constant submission and giving up and relenting and turning over and turning back toward what matters. Yeah. But I feel like I don't want to give people the wrong impression either, because the joy is wonderful and beautiful, and the bliss and all of that, but like it doesn't come without a cost. Like it's not free. Like the cost is like your life pretty much. So I don't want to give the impression that like this, you can just like have this joy without like giving up something of what we perceive to be valuable, because that's not true.
When kind of like when you're doing the dissolution at the end of sadhana, and you're bringing it back into your heart region, and it is there is sort of a profound sadness in some ways. Like I usually don't feel sad personally, but I know what he's referring to, and like it's like sort of a loss. I think that that's maybe a good way to articulate it. There is something that is like you have to integrate all of what's happened, all of the feelings. It's not just the bliss, it's not just the joy. Of course those things exist, but then it's also that realization that it is voidness, or it is emptiness, or it is however your yana describes it.
Yeah, nothing means nothing, as my teacher likes to say.
I like that.
Quoting
like that a lot.
Meher Baba, I think. Like, I think Meher Baba wrote something along the lines of like, nobody wants to accept that nothing means nothing.
That's a
like
very
you'll often hear like teachings even from maybe other lineages claiming like there's this idea of emptiness, which is interdependent origination, but nothingness is, there's not nothing. And I'm like, oh yes, there is. Well, it can't be said to be is or is not, but there, like, nothingness, yes to nothingness for sure.
I think that is also interesting, this idea of like consenting to nothingness rather than just accepting nothingness, like because you sort of have to consent that it's real or not real.
Well, but it has to consent first that you can consent.
Right, exactly. So
like
that's
if it didn't consent that you could indulge in this delusion, like it wouldn't even be possible.
No, you're totally right. That's the thing. That is what I think is challenging to articulate about Buddhist metaphysics. And there obviously are amazing writers, and you're an amazing writer, but there's many of them, and many, Buddhist scholars. And I'm not so hot on the Buddhist scholarship lately, but I think that there's so many Buddhist writers and teachers and who do articulate it in like very profound ways. But I sometimes feel like it can be impenetrable until you are ready to acknowledge it, and then, like you say, it has to also acknowledge you, and then you can sort of form this sort of dialectical relationship where you can be interdependent but also nothing at the same time.
Well, I think that's what I said when we were talking about like the struggle, like to kind of like submit, because the dialectic like is wrong. Like that's the mistake. That's part of the mistake, because there is no dialectic. Like it is really just nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And then
it's getting past the illusion appearance, right?
Well, it's I don't know, the way I think of it at the moment, which is not based on anything than my own opinion. Unfortunately, I'm not like well grounded in Buddhist metaphysics, or like I can't quote you like Longchenpa or Nagarjuna, but it's like what's going on, as best I can understand it with my very small, limited, tiny mind, is reality consists of like flickering between nothing and appearance, but it's happening so rapidly. Like if we could measure it somehow, which would be impossible, it would be something like probably like 1 trillion times a second. Like it's so fast, there's no way to actually like notice it or perceive it. Like instead you just find perfect peace, because I think what happens is like our attention is kind of stuck on the appearance side,
Mm-hmm.
no matter what state we're in.
Mm-hmm.
But then if we are in like practice deeply enough, it like flips to the nothing side. If that's it's not really a side, but like it flips. When it goes to nothing, our attention like goes with it, and we're gone, and everything's gone. At least however long that happens to be, which is no time at all, really. But it seems like there's some duration, and then the rearisal of the attention in appearance. Like, so it's just like a constant like arising, falling back, arising, falling back, arising, falling back. And that's the nothing and the brightness. But that's it.
Wow, that was incredibly profound, Greg. I'm going to have to re-listen to this a couple times to really penetrate that, but I appreciate it. And from what my superficial understanding, I agree. I mean, it's challenging. It's even challenging for me to articulate it. And, I've been thinking about some of these things, at least for quite a long time. And, it's very difficult to put into words, even though I do understand some Buddhist metaphysics and I have some background in reading like the texts, and I appreciate that you brought up Longchenpa instead of Tsongkhapa, because I am more of a Longchenpa fan personally. But
yeah, let's go.
But and I obviously Nagarjuna, you can't this is fundamental, right? So, but I think it is challenging, and I think that it has been sort of this story of Buddhism to be misunderstood in some ways, at least in the exterior, and not, and maybe even by practitioners. And but I think that that is part of like the wisdom science process, is like building like sort of a knowledge set through experience, through text, through instruction, through pointing out, through experience. So I agree with you. I'm not sure that I'm there.
Well, I'm not. I often wonder, like I know it's called Buddhism, but like whatever it is that I'm doing, or maybe you too, like I wonder, like, is it even really accurate to call it Buddhism? Like, we're more like followers of Guru Rinpoche than Shakyamuni.
100%.
And if I'm honest, I would say it's more like science of the siddhis than like any kind of like Buddhist path, like that I would recognize as traditionally Buddhist. But I'm just some Western occult guy, so you can't really take my opinion as anything worth listening to in that regard.
But I think that you provide, actually, I disagree with you on that, because I think that you've always provided a valuable perspective on this subject because of your Western occult perspective, and just like how long, like how intensive your background is in that. And I agree with you though about Guru Rinpoche, and how just like he's so fundamental, especially for Nyingma, and just, I mean, you cannot even overemphasize it, even a small amount, or even just a tantra and Buddhist tantra, even Shakta tantra, they acknowledge him, because it's impossible not to. It's impossible not to sort of see his interactions with what they would call deities, or like their god forms. So I just, it is, yes, we do definitely practice like a tradition that is, I always think of it as very innovative, like what was going on in the 6th, 7th, and 8th centuries, like just extremely innovative, something that was not necessarily brand new, but it was coalescing in a new way, in a new form, and it was very profound, and it was not quite like what had come before it.
Oh man, it's so profound that even to this day, like it's so radical, and it's just, it is incredibly mind-blowing and sublime. And the fact that I think it's like, it's just hard for people to imagine. I think even when people encounter it, they can't fully understand what they're coming to.
No, you're totally right. I think it is one of those things, and it is sort of, I know many other people always suspect me of being like a part of some mystery cult, and perhaps it is, and perhaps that's what tantra is, just in a general complex, and then that's okay too. But I think that what I try and do, I think you do this very well, is it like sort of a demystification without direct revelation, and sort of like say, like, yes, you can approach it in like these smaller ways, or understand it in smaller ways, but at the same time, like, try and be non-conceptual about it, like try and let those things also go. So I mean, that might be an amazing place to end it. What do you think?
Yeah, I feel like this has been a pretty wild ride in terms of a conversation. So I'm not sure if people followed along with this, then I'm pretty impressed.
I know that we will have at least 10 people listening to this very intensely, and like intently as well, and who will just fanboy over this and sort of jealous that I was able to speak with you. I appreciate you, Brother Greg, so much for taking the time out to speak with me, so extensively about your experiences, about your work, and just like know that we appreciate you. And all these little, like, even for me, I have all these little Dharma bros that like DM me, and I have nothing really to say to them. Like, I have no good advice to give them. I just am like, buy this book, so, but I just thank you so much. And it was an incredible honor for me, honestly. And this will be my 9th episode
Oh,
on
sweet.
and I kind of did it on purpose, obviously, because
Appreciate that very much.
Like it was synchronistic. Today's also the 9th. Today's the Dharma Protector Day, as I mentioned. And yeah, I really appreciate it, Greg. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Jin. It's really been a pleasure speaking with you, and you asked really good questions. It's been probably one of the better interviews I've ever had the pleasure to do. And it's really fun to speak with you. And I hope that everyone understands that if I've said anything of benefit or that sounded at all like it had any wisdom behind it, then you can know that it came from my teacher. And if I said anything mistaken or stupid or opinionated that isn't grounded in fact or truth, then you can rest assured that's my opinion and my mistake, because it's always how it tends to go. So
I mean, I agree. And like anything that I misspoke on, do not, yes, it was totally Jin. It was not any of the gurus or the refuge tree. So I think that is an amazing way to say that. And again, thank you so much, Greg. Do you want to plug all of your things, which I will, of course, include in the show notes, and all of your links, all your books, everything?
Oh, thank you so much. So yeah, I guess, again, the podcast is Occult of Personality. You can find it wherever you get your podcasts. Our membership site, chamberofreflection.com. I guess Brother Greg on Linktree for all of my links. If you want to email me, brothergreg@protonmail.com. And I'm happy to chat with people, but please don't have expectations about responses or times about responding. But otherwise, I'm happy to chat, and I look forward to it. So I thank you again for having me on the show and asking such interesting questions.
Well, no problem at all, Greg. And you do have an open invitation on if you ever want to do like a smaller show and speak with a fellow, on the path. I'm very happy to host you anytime. So thank you so much.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And yeah, I'd love to chat again. And, whether it's for recording or not, but love to keep in touch. So
absolutely. We definitely will. And thank you. I'm going to hit the record now.
All right.
Hey, this is Jin the Ninja, and if you enjoyed the show, you can check out more episodes on Spotify and Anchor, and you can check me out on Twitter at Wukong Reborn, WUKONG Reborn, and on Instagram at Threshold Saints. And there's a link tree in the show notes, so you can check out all my appearances and my shows to date.